Ladies, let's be honest. We've all met men who can text you 1 minute like you're his world and disappear the next like you never existed. He's got you thinking, what did I do wrong? But here's the truth. You didn't do anything wrong. You just started caring too early for someone who was still playing games. The first step to outsmart a man who's messing with your emotions. Recognize the game before you play it. See, some men don't come to love you. They come to study you. They find your soft spot, your kind heart, your forgiving nature, and they use it like a remote control. But once you see the game, baby, the game is over. Before you can outsmart a man who's messing with your emotions, you first have to understand the kind of game he's playing. Most people get caught not because they're weak, but because they're unaware. You can't win a game you don't know exists. Some men come with charm, compliments, and consistency at first. They'll make you feel like you finally met someone who gets you. But then slowly things start shifting. The calls get fewer. The texts get shorter. The attention starts fading. One day he's all in, and the next he's emotionally missing. You start questioning yourself, overanalyzing every little detail, wondering if you did something wrong. But what you need to understand is that inconsistency isn't confusion. It's control. It's part of the game. When someone knows they have emotional power over you, they start using it like leverage. He might not say it out loud, but he knows how to keep you hooked. A sweet word here, a distant move there. It's push and pull, give and take, hot and cold. And every time he withdraws, you chase harder, thinking if you just do a little more, love a little deeper, or stay a little longer, he'll come back to being that man from the beginning. But that's exactly how the trap works. The problem isn't that you care too much. The problem is that you haven't yet recognized what's happening, that your emotions are being tested, not valued. See, emotional manipulation isn't always loud. It's quiet, it's subtle. It's the good morning text that disappears for 3 days, the promises that never turn into actions, the plans that always seem to fall through. It's the way he makes you feel like you're the problem when you ask for clarity. That confusion isn't love, it's strategy. Some people know exactly what they're doing when they mix affection with uncertainty. They want to keep you emotionally invested, but mentally unsteady. The more unsure you are, the more they control the narrative. Recognizing that pattern is the first real act of power. Once you start seeing the pattern, everything changes. You stop taking things personally. You stop thinking, maybe if I love him harder, he'll love me back. Instead, you start saying, if he cared about me, I wouldn't have to beg for the bare minimum. Awareness creates distance, and distance brings peace. The moment you recognize emotional manipulation, you no longer dance to its rhythm. You start moving to your own beat. But recognition takes honesty. You have to be real with yourself about what's happening. Sometimes we lie to ourselves just to keep the hope alive. We tell ourselves he's just busy, that he's not good at expressing emotions, that maybe he needs time. But let's be real. When someone wants to make you feel secure, they don't leave you confused. They don't make you guess their intentions. So stop interpreting mixed signals as emotional depth. They're not deep. They're distracting. Love should give you peace, not anxiety. The real reason many people don't recognize the game is because the attention feels addictive. The highs are so high that you ignore the lows. One compliment from him feels like sunshine, and one cold text feels like a storm. That emotional roller coaster becomes your normal. But when you recognize the game, you step off that ride. You start asking different questions. Instead of wondering, why isn't he treating me right? You start asking, why am I allowing it? The truth is, you can't change a player, but you can change your participation. When you see manipulation for what it is, you take away its power, you stop reacting. You stop explaining yourself to someone who already knows they're wrong, but just enjoys watching you try to prove your point. You start valuing your peace more than their attention. You learn that love isn't proven by how much pain you can endure. It's proven by how much peace you can protect. Recognizing the game also means understanding your triggers. Maybe you grew up thinking love had to hurt. Maybe you've been conditioned to believe that struggle equals loyalty. That's how manipulation takes root. It feeds on your empathy, your patience, and your hope. But the moment you become aware of your emotional patterns, you stop falling for familiar pain. You stop mistaking inconsistency for chemistry. You stop confusing manipulation with passion. Awareness gives you choices. When you recognize the game, you stop reacting emotionally and start responding intelligently. You start noticing who apologizes with actions, not just words. You start watching patterns instead of promises. You start understanding that someone who truly values you doesn't make you question your worth. They make you feel safe, seen, and steady. And when you finally see the game clearly, you don't get bitter. You get better. You don't chase closure because you realize closure isn't something they give you. It's something you decide. You close the door not because you hate them, but because you love yourself more. You move forward not with revenge, but with wisdom. You become smarter, stronger, and more selective with your energy. Recognizing the game doesn't make you cold. It makes you conscious. It teaches you that real love doesn't require guessing, begging, or fixing. It flows naturally, consistently, and peacefully. So when you finally see that emotional manipulation for what it is, you stop being a player in someone else's story and become the author of your own. That's how you outsmart the man who's messing with your emotions. By waking up, standing up, and refusing to play in a game that doesn't serve your peace, there comes a moment in every woman's life when she has to stop explaining, stop convincing, and stop begging for what she already deserves. When you find yourself repeating your value to someone who keeps questioning it, you're not in love, you're in a negotiation. And love was never meant to be a bargain. The problem is, too many people get caught up trying to prove they're good enough for someone who doesn't even know what they're looking for. You can't teach someone how to value something they never intended to appreciate. When a man is serious about you, you won't have to explain your worth. He'll recognize it the moment he meets you. Negotiating your worth happens slowly. It starts small. You overlook a broken promise because he didn't mean it. You accept inconsistent effort because you know he's trying. You forgive one too many times because you believe love requires patience. But before you know it, you've lowered your standards so much that you've lost sight of what you actually deserve. You start compromising on the very things you used to stand for, all in the name of keeping the peace or holding on to potential. But potential is a dangerous illusion. It's like falling in love with a maybe and calling it a plan. When you start negotiating your worth, you send a silent message that you're willing to accept less. You may not say it out loud, but your actions speak volumes. Every time you accept disrespect disguised as jokes, every time you tolerate inconsistency because you don't want to seem too emotional, you're teaching someone how to treat you. And the longer you keep explaining what you deserve, the less they'll believe it. Because if it was really that valuable, you wouldn't have to keep advertising it. The truth is, people don't value what comes easy. They value what stands firm. There's a difference between communication and convincing. Communication is when two people meet in the middle. Convincing is when one person keeps shrinking just to fit into the other's comfort zone. The moment you feel like you have to sell your worth, you've already discounted it. Love shouldn't require a PowerPoint presentation. You shouldn't have to perform to be appreciated. Your softness, your strength, your loyalty, they should be felt, not debated. Sometimes the need to negotiate your worth comes from fear, fear of being alone, fear of starting over, fear that maybe this is as good as it gets. But that's the trap. The fear of loss makes you settle for less. You start believing that having half of someone is better than having no one at all. But the truth is, half love is more draining than loneliness. At least when you're alone, you can refill your cup. When you're being half loved, Someone keeps sipping from it until you have nothing left. The moment you stop negotiating your worth, everything changes. You stop showing up for people who only meet you halfway. You stop answering messages from someone who remembers you only when they're bored. You stop giving access to anyone who hasn't earned consistency. You stop being emotionally available to people who are spiritually absent. That shift doesn't come from pride. It comes from peace. It comes from finally realizing that you don't have to fight to be chosen. When you stop negotiating your worth, you stop trying to prove your loyalty to someone who tests it instead of protecting it. You stop explaining your standards because they were never supposed to be explained. They were supposed to be respected. The woman who knows her worth doesn't raise her voice. She raises her boundaries. She doesn't chase clarity. She creates it. She doesn't settle for attention. She demands intention. People often confuse humility with self-sacrifice. Being humble doesn't mean letting people walk over you. It means knowing your power and using it with grace. It means understanding that silence can be louder than any argument. When you stop defending your value, you shift the energy. The power moves back to you. You no longer beg someone to stay. You simply step aside and let whoever wants to leave go. Because when your value is clear, your decisions become easy. Stopping the negotiation doesn't mean you build walls. It means you build standards. It's knowing that your love is not a charity. It's a gift. And gifts aren't handed out to those who can't appreciate them. You can't make a man love you by lowering yourself to meet his comfort. If he can't rise to meet your level, let him watch from below. When you hold your standard, the right one will step up. The wrong one will step away. Either way, you win. The real strength is in walking away from what doesn't serve you, not because you're bitter, but because you're finally aware. You realize you don't have to chase what's not meant for you. You learn to rest in your value, to move with confidence, to understand that being alone isn't punishment, it's preparation. The space left by someone who couldn't value you becomes room for someone who will. You stop chasing closure. You stop over-explaining. You stop performing emotional gymnastics to earn validation. You simply exist in your worth, and that energy alone becomes your filter. People who aren't ready for a woman who knows her value will fade. And that's exactly how it should be. You stop measuring your worth by who stays. You start measuring it by how peaceful you feel. When you stop negotiating your worth, life starts negotiating with you. The universe begins to align opportunities, people, and moments that match your energy. Because the world responds to how you see yourself. The day you decide you're no longer for sale, no longer for discount, no longer for compromise, that's the day you take your power back. There's a kind of power that doesn't come from shouting, crying, or proving your point. It comes from silence. It comes from calm. It comes from the moment you stop reacting to everything designed to disturb your peace. When a man is trying to mess with your emotions, what he's really trying to do is get control of your reactions. Because once he controls how you react, he controls how you feel. And when he controls how you feel, he controls the outcome. Emotional control isn't about pretending you don't care. It's about refusing to let someone else decide how much peace you get to have today. Emotional control means you stop giving your energy to chaos. It means when he tries to provoke you with mixed messages, sudden distance, or careless words, you take a breath before you take the bait. The moment you stop reacting on impulse, you start thinking with clarity. Most emotional manipulation only works when you respond immediately. When you defend, explain, or chase, that's what feeds it. The silence you give instead, that's power. Because now he's the one who doesn't know what you're thinking. Now he's the one uncomfortable. That's how the energy shifts. People who play emotional games thrive on reactions. They love seeing how quickly they can pull you from calm to chaos. They'll text after ignoring you for days just to see if you'll still answer right away. They'll say something sharp and then watch how much it shakes you. The moment you stop reacting, the game loses its thrill. The control he thought he had starts slipping away. because emotional control is like armor. The more calm you are, the harder it is for anyone to wound you. When you stay centered, you see everything clearly. You start noticing patterns that you once excused. You begin to see when affection is real and when it's manipulation dressed as love. You start to understand that not every action deserves your energy, not every word deserves your response, and not every man deserves your access. Emotional control helps you separate what's true from what's being used to test you. It gives you the strength to observe instead of absorb. Some people will call it cold, but it's not cold, it's wise. You've just learned that not every emotional invitation deserves your RSVP. When you stop reacting, you're not being distant, you're being deliberate. You're choosing peace over drama, dignity over desperation. Because the person who can stay calm in emotional chaos is the one who truly holds the power. The one who doesn't flinch when provoked, doesn't rush to respond when ignored, and doesn't crumble when someone withdraws. That's the one who's in control. When you master your emotions, manipulation stops working. The late night, I miss you messages don't move you anymore because you've learned to measure consistency, not words. The sudden interest after silence doesn't impress you because you've seen it before. You understand that attention given out of guilt or boredom isn't affection. And you don't need to match someone's instability with your own. You don't chase closure because peace doesn't come from other people. It comes from you choosing not to let them disrupt your balance again. Emotional control also means you learn how to respond with intention instead of emotion. You stop saying things just to make someone understand how much they hurt you. You let your actions and silence do the speaking. You stop arguing with people who already know they're wrong but just enjoy watching you lose your calm. You stop explaining yourself to people who have already made up their minds. You start saving your words for people who actually listen. That restraint isn't weakness, it's maturity, it's wisdom wrapped in patience. When you gain emotional control, you start realizing that peace is more powerful than revenge. You stop trying to prove that you're unbothered because you truly are. You don't need to show off your healing. It becomes visible in the way you move, the way you speak, the way you no longer react to things that used to shake you. People who once played with your emotions will start to notice the difference. They'll feel it. They'll test you again, expecting the old version of you to appear, the one who would cry, call, and chase. But when they meet silence instead of a breakdown, they'll realize they no longer have access to that part of you. Emotional control doesn't mean you don't feel pain. It means you've learned not to perform it for people who caused it. You allow yourself to feel it privately, to process it, to learn from it. But you don't let it run your actions. You don't let temporary emotions make permanent decisions. You understand that peace is too expensive to give away every time someone decides to play games. The beautiful thing about emotional control is that it changes the way you love yourself. You begin to respect your energy, to choose your reactions wisely, to respond to life from a place of wisdom instead of wounds. You start to understand that real power isn't about controlling others. It's about controlling yourself when others can't control theirs. You stop needing closure, validation, or apology to move on. You become the calm in your own storm. And once you master that level of self-control, no one can play with you the same way again, because manipulation only works on those who need attention to feel secure. When you're already whole, their games fall flat. Emotional control becomes your shield and your strategy. You stop being predictable and you start being peaceful. You stop being reactive and you start being radiant. Because the woman who controls her emotions controls the entire game, and that right there is a power no one can take away. There comes a time when talking no longer fixes anything. You can explain, argue, cry, and plead, but some people aren't listening to understand. They're listening to measure your reaction. They don't want to solve the problem. They want to see how much control they still have over you. That's when silence becomes your greatest power. Silence isn't weakness. Silence isn't surrender. Silence is strategy. It's the calm refusal to play in someone else's chaos. It's the sound of emotional maturity saying, I see what you're doing, and I'm not joining in. Silence is the most powerful answer you can give when someone's goal is to keep you emotionally unbalanced. Silence hurts people who feed on attention. The moment you stop reacting, they start wondering why. When you no longer text back immediately, when you stop arguing over things that never change, when you stop explaining yourself to someone who already knows what they're doing, they begin to lose power because their entire control depended on your response. They wanted to pull your strings like a puppet, and suddenly you stop dancing. That silence becomes louder than any words you could have said. It's not revenge, it's peace speaking. It's dignity wrapped in stillness. Silence makes people confront themselves. When you stop talking, they're left with their own thoughts. And that's uncomfortable for someone who hides behind manipulation. Your quiet starts echoing louder than your arguments ever did. The same person who once ignored your words will now feel your absence. You'll notice that people who once said, you talk too much, will now be the ones asking, why aren't you saying anything? Because silence shifts the power dynamic. It's no longer about what they can make you say. It's about what they can't make you feel. Sometimes silence is the only language manipulation doesn't understand. When you're silent, they can't twist your words, they can't provoke your emotions, and they can't predict your next move. Silence keeps them guessing. It takes away their script. It confuses anyone who's used to seeing you react. They don't know whether you're hurt, healed, or completely done. That uncertainty becomes their punishment. Silence says, I no longer need your approval to find peace. People underestimate silence because they mistake it for indifference. But silence is full of strength. It's full of clarity. It's you choosing not to match someone's energy, but to protect your own. You're no longer trying to be understood by someone committed to misunderstanding you. You're no longer wasting words on people who never respected them. Silence is self-respect in its purest form. It's saying, I've said enough. Now I'll let my absence speak. The power of silence lies in timing. It's not about ignoring everyone. It's about knowing when words no longer serve you. When every conversation turns into a circle, when every argument feels rehearsed, when your honesty is met with deflection, that's your cue to go quiet. Because silence ends what endless talking can't. It stops the cycle. It changes the rhythm. It forces a pause. That pause is powerful because it gives you time to think instead of react, to heal instead of explain, to choose instead of chase. When you start mastering silence, you notice how peace begins to grow. You realize you don't need to announce your growth. You don't need to prove your side of the story. The right people will feel your truth and your calmness. The wrong people will crumble under the weight of their own guilt. Silence reveals what noise tries to hide. It exposes people because they can't blame you when you're quiet. They have to face their own actions without your words distracting them. Silence also teaches you emotional discipline. It trains you to respond from strength, not reaction. It helps you break free from the need to always explain yourself. You stop trying to make everyone understand your heart. You understand that your peace doesn't require validation. You learn that sometimes the best way to win an argument is to not have one at all. Because silence doesn't mean you lost. It means you've evolved. It means you've outgrown the need to participate in conversations that drain you. Silence speaks in ways words can't. It says, I'm not angry, I'm aware. It says, I'm not ignoring you, I'm protecting myself. It says, I don't hate you, I just value my peace more than your drama. Silence communicates maturity, self-respect, and emotional control. It tells the world you've learned the difference between needing closure and creating it yourself. Because the truth is, closure isn't always a conversation. Sometimes it's a quiet decision. Silence changes the way people see you. The same ones who once took your kindness for weakness will now be confused by your calm. They won't know how to approach you anymore. Because your silence says what your words couldn't. You've changed. You've grown. You've learned that not everything needs a reaction, not every insult needs a defense, and not every goodbye needs an explanation. Silence turns pain into power. It transforms emotion into elegance. It becomes your quiet declaration that you no longer need chaos to feel alive. Silence gives you back control. You're no longer waiting for someone to text, to call, to apologize. You're no longer glued to your phone waiting for a sign. You've reclaimed your energy. You've learned that attention isn't affection and silence isn't loneliness, it's self-respect. Because when you make your silence louder than your words, you stop fighting for recognition and start standing in your worth. You stop seeking closure and start creating peace. You stop being a participant in emotional games and start being the referee. And from that moment forward, nobody can manipulate you the same way again, because silence has made you stronger than any argument ever could. When someone plays with your emotions, the natural reaction is to keep looking at them, analyzing them, trying to understand what went wrong, what changed, and why they stopped treating you the way they once did. But that's exactly how you stay stuck. Your eyes stay fixed on the person who broke your peace instead of the person who can rebuild it you. The smartest thing you can do when someone tries to mess with your emotions is to flip the script. Stop making them the main character in your story and start being the star of your own. The more you focus on yourself, the less control anyone else has over you. Flipping the script means taking back the power you gave away. You stop letting your happiness depend on whether or not someone texts you back. You stop measuring your value based on their mood swings or attention span. You stop chasing validation from someone who keeps giving it in doses. Instead, you start pouring into yourself the same energy you were giving to them. The time you spent waiting for them to choose you, you now spend choosing yourself. The effort you used to put into fixing them, you now use to build yourself. The attention you once gave to their excuses, you now give to your healing. That shift changes everything. When you focus on you, your glow becomes your revenge. You don't have to post about it or prove it. It shows in your peace. It shows in your energy. It shows in the way you walk, speak, and smile again. Because when you stop chasing people, you start attracting peace. The energy that once went into trying to make someone love you now fuels your own growth. You start to see how much of your power was spent on trying to change someone who didn't even want to change. That realization stings at first, but then it sets you free. Because now you understand that your healing is not a group project. When you flip the script, you stop living in reaction mode. You're no longer emotionally checking your phone for their message or replaying conversations in your head. You start waking up thinking about your goals, not your wounds. You start spending your energy on becoming better, not bitter. Because focusing on yourself doesn't mean you're selfish. It means you finally learned that self-respect is the foundation of peace. When you stop making someone else the center of your emotional universe, you finally create space to rediscover yourself, the version of you before the pain, before the confusion, before the games. Focusing on you doesn't mean pretending nothing happened. It means deciding not to let what happened define you. You give yourself permission to grieve, but not permission to stay broken. You stop trying to find closure in someone else's explanation and start finding it in your own reflection. You start asking, what did this teach me about me? Instead of, why did he do this to me? Because growth starts when you stop asking, why them, and start asking, what now? That's how you flip the story from heartbreak to healing. When you start focusing on yourself, you'll notice how your standards rise naturally. You no longer crave inconsistent attention. You start desiring peace more than passion. You stop confusing effort with energy. You learn that you can love deeply without losing your boundaries. You start saying no without guilt, resting without apology, and walking away without fear. You realize that the best thing you can do for your future is to stop romanticizing people who couldn't meet you halfway. That shift from external validation to internal growth becomes the turning point in your story. People will notice when you flip the script. The same ones who used to play with your emotions will come back, not because they've changed, but because your energy has. You've become unpredictable. You've become harder to manipulate. Your silence, your glow, your peace, they'll all make them wonder what happened. But you'll know exactly what happened. You stopped being available for confusion. You stopped letting people rent space in your mind for free. You became too focused on building yourself to chase anyone who broke you. When you focus on yourself, you begin to attract the kind of love that doesn't play games. You raise your vibration, and that energy draws in people who match your peace. The more you grow, the clearer it becomes who deserves access to you and who doesn't. You stop needing to prove your worth because you live it daily. You start setting boundaries that don't need to be announced. You learn that peace is not found in someone's attention, but in your own discipline to protect your energy. Flipping the script is about reclaiming your narrative. You stop telling the story of how someone hurt you and start telling the story of how you healed. You stop identifying as the victim and start identifying as the author. You rewrite the plot from confusion to clarity, from dependency to independence, from heartbreak to rebirth. And in that transformation, you start realizing that sometimes people come into your life not to stay, but to wake you up to who you really are. As you focus on you, you begin to understand that the best kind of closure is success, peace, and self-love. You don't need to block, clap back, or compete. Your evolution is the response. You outgrow the need to prove anything to anyone. You start enjoying your own company, chasing your own goals, and appreciating your own growth. And that's when real healing happens. When you stop asking for validation and start living in purpose. Flipping the script doesn't mean you stopped loving. It means you started loving smarter. You finally see that loving yourself isn't a backup plan. It's the plan. When you focus on yourself, you stop being a participant in emotional manipulation and start being the creator of your peace. You become living proof that the best way to win against someone who tried to break you is to build yourself so beautifully that they don't even recognize the person they once played with. The greatest comeback isn't revenge, it's peace. The best payback isn't a sharp message or a dramatic exit. It's becoming so confident, so healed, and so focused that the person who once played games with you can no longer even reach your energy. When you stop allowing emotional manipulation to control you, you transform into someone he can't play anymore. And that's when the tables turn. That's when he starts to miss the woman who used to give him endless chances, patient explanations, and soft forgiveness. But this time she's gone for real, not angry, not broken, just done. Letting him miss the woman who can't be played starts with finally seeing the pattern for what it was. You begin to realize that he wasn't confused, he was comfortable. Comfortable with knowing you'd always be there no matter how he acted. Comfortable knowing he could ignore your messages and you'd still respond when he came back. Comfortable knowing he could disappoint you and you'd still defend him to everyone else. But the day you stop being predictable, everything changes. The day you stop chasing, stop explaining, stop waiting, that's the day the game ends. Because players can't play people who don't show up for the game. When you pull back your energy, you take back your power. You stop feeding his ego with reactions. You stop giving him the satisfaction of knowing he still affects you. That silence becomes deafening. At first, he might act like he doesn't notice. He might even try to provoke you, test you, or pretend he's moved on. But deep down, he feels the difference. He feels the absence of your attention, your care, your softness. The energy you once poured into him now belongs to your healing, and that's what starts to haunt him. Because what most people don't realize is that presence is powerful, but absence is unforgettable. He'll start remembering the little things. How you used to care even when he didn't. How your voice used to sound when you laughed at his jokes. How your energy made him feel important when no one else did. He'll remember how it felt to be understood by you, how you forgave him when you had every reason to walk away. But this time, the version of you he remembers no longer exists. That woman evolved. She learned her worth. She stopped confusing loyalty with self-sacrifice. She became the woman who loves deeply but never at her own expense again. The woman who can't be played anymore doesn't argue. She observes. She doesn't chase. She attracts. She doesn't settle for mixed signals. She walks away at the first sign of inconsistency. She doesn't beg for effort. She matches energy. That transformation doesn't happen overnight. It happens the moment you realize your peace is too precious to gamble. It happens when you wake up one day and say, I'm not angry anymore. I'm just finished. That's not bitterness. That's growth. Letting him miss you doesn't mean you play games in return. You don't have to fake happiness or pretend you've moved on to make a point. Your peace makes the point for you. Your silence becomes your closure. The way you live without reacting, the way you smile without explanation, the way you move on without a public announcement, that's what he'll remember. Because nothing confuses a man more than the woman he thought he broke, standing tall, glowing, and unbothered. When you stop being available to the same old pattern, you show him something he's never seen before. A woman who doesn't need him to find herself. That's when regret sets in. He'll start to realize too late that the love he took for granted was rare. That not every woman forgives like you, listens like you, or loves like you. He'll start to miss the stability you brought, the peace you offered, the way you believed in him, even when he didn't believe in himself. But by the time he realizes your worth, you'll already be too busy living the life you always deserved. The woman who can't be played anymore has learned that real strength isn't loud. It's quiet. It's found in the decision to let go of what no longer serves you. It's found in the smile you wear after heartbreak, in the calm that replaces chaos, in the peace that follows closure. It's found in knowing you don't need to prove you're over him. You just are. Because when you truly heal, you don't want them back. You want yourself back. You want your laughter, your confidence, your light. And when you reclaim that no one can take it again, letting him miss you is not about revenge. It's about release. It's about letting him sit with the silence he created. It's about allowing him to realize that access to you was a privilege, not a guarantee. It's about understanding that not every ending needs a confrontation. Some just need distance. He'll remember the version of you who gave him grace, but he'll never meet her again. That woman outgrew the pain, outgrew the games, outgrew the need for closure. And maybe one day he'll scroll through old messages or revisit old memories and wonder how he lost someone like you. But that's not your concern anymore, because the woman who can't be played doesn't wait for someone to regret losing her. She's too busy living a life so full of peace, purpose, and joy that regret can't even reach her. The woman who can't be played has learned that love isn't proven by how much she endures, but by how much she protects her peace. And once she learns that lesson, she becomes the one that every man remembers, not because she stayed, but because she finally walked away.